I was asked to provide an overview on Natalizumab and PML, in particular the current figures and possible risk factors from the regulatory perspective. Natalizumab is a recombinant humanized IgE4 monoclonal antibody directed to alpha-4 integrins, both alpha-4 beta-1 and alpha-4 beta-7. These integrins are located on the surface of all leukocytes, with exception of neutrophil granulocytes. Alpha-4 integrins play an important role for leukocyte trafficking into tissue. And Natalizumab in particular blocks adhesion to the endothelium and transmigration of leukocytes into the inflammatory tissue, in the case of multiple sclerosis, the brain. Natalizumab was first authorized in November 2004 in the United States for the indication multiple sclerosis. And shortly thereafter, it was suspended for use in the US due to 3 reports of PML, 2 in MS patient and 1 in a Crohn's disease patient. After extensive reanalyzation of safety data from patients treated in clinical trials and outside clinical trials with Tysabri in the US, it was again authorized in February 2006, and it was thereafter authorized in the European Union. I think I can skip this because the tropism of the virus was already mentioned. And I would only like to point out that the indication for the treatment of multiple sclerosis for Tysabri is slightly different among the US and the European Economic Area regions. And as you can see here, that is the wording of the indication in the particular package information in the US and in the European area. There is, in the US region, the indication is broader compared to the European Union indication. And I would like to point this out because this may be important and may explain some of the findings which I will present later. I would also like to mention that in the US, there is also the indication of Crohn's disease. Treatment has been granted in contrast to the European Union. So this is a brief overview of the PML cases after Natalizumab, and you see here that 144 confirmed PML cases are mentioned on this slide. That the data cutoff was the end of June, beginning of July, so that is the difference to the other speakers. And to be clear, on Friday we were informed that we have now 149 confirmed cases. We will discuss the issue of confirmed and pending cases later in the talk of my colleague Dirk Menzer. So there are, in my presentation, 144 confirmed cases, and of course there are some additional pending cases for which the PML is yet not confirmed. And what you can also see is that the majority of cases, 80 of these cases, occurred in the European Economic Area. Although it needs to be highlighted that slightly more patients are treated in the US compared to the European Union. There's one patient with Crohn's disease who experienced PML, and you can also see the male-female ratio. The mean age of PML patients is now 44.7 years, and you can see that there is a huge range between 15 years and 71 years. So there is one teenager girl from the European Union who have experienced PML. It's clearly off-label use in the European Union. This girl was also seropositive prior to PML development, antibody seropositive. And you can also see that there is a slight difference between the age in the US and in the European Union, a difference of 6 years. And what is also astonishing is that the age in those patients who had a fatal outcome of their PML is higher compared to the mean age of the group. The treatment duration to onset is approximately now 30.8 months, and the median is close to this, 30.5 months. And you might remember that previous publication reported a lower treatment duration to onset time, approximately 24 to 25 months. And what we have seen is, over time, a slight increase of the treatment duration time to onset. And we interpret this that the incidence of PML might increase with the increasing number of patients being treated for long term. So this is a picture showing the individual PML cases and the time to onset of PML. And what you can see here in this picture is that there is a broad range between 8 months, the case from the United Kingdom, and 9 months, this 15-year-old girl, up to 45 months. And what you can also see is that the increase may start a little bit earlier than the 24 months mentioned in so many publications. I think it's about 21 months. And the other issue is that cases of PML following Tysabri treatment have been reported from 21 countries. And even countries like Iceland and Luxembourg, where only a few patients have been, MS patients have been treated with Tysabri. So with regard to the incidence, here you see the incidence divided into geographic areas, and that is US, including Canada, and the European Union and the rest of the world. And the rest of the world means Australia, 1 case, and Switzerland, 5 cases. And what you can see here is the incidence is expressed in infusions, so those patients with 1 and more infusions, those patients with 6 and more infusions, and 12 and more infusions, and so on. And what you can see here is that apparently the incidence based on patients exposed for PML is higher in the European economic area compared to the US. It's about 2 in 1,000 for all patients treated in the European economic area and the rest of the world, compared to 1 in the US. So that needs to be explained. And what you can also see is that in the European Union, those patients with 24 infusions and more, in those patients, the incidence is significantly higher than for the overall, compared to all patients treated with Tysabri in this region. And for the US, this increase may start earlier, maybe even 1.5 years, 18 months, or 17 months after the start of treatment with Tysabri. So you see also this decline after 36 infusions, but this may be linked to the fact that only 25% of all patients are treated for more than 3 years with Tysabri, so there's less experience beyond 3 years of treatment. We need to follow this up. We have analyzed the first symptoms of PML in these patients, and what you can see here, and several patients had of course multiple symptoms, and what you can see here is that in nearly half of the patients, cognitive, behavioral, or psychological symptoms were reported first. That means slower thinking, also increase in depression, and so on. In several of these patients, these symptoms were very mild, and that is really challenging, as it is not easy to detect these first symptoms. Then we have in 1/3 of the patient motor symptoms like hemiparesis or focal paresis. We have frequently seen speech difficulties, visual disturbances, and cerebellar syndromes. And I would also like to point out, and that is on this very busy slide, sorry for this, these are more details with regard to the first symptoms in these patients. I would also like to point out that 4 patients were totally asymptomatic. And I think the information I got on Friday is that now we have 5 totally asymptomatic patients. These patients were detected, or the PML was detected via routine MRI. So with regard to outcome, based on the ICH criteria, we regulators are used to this criteria. You can see here that 19% of this patient died. Some are considered by the rapporteur, the Paul-Ehrlich Institute, 3% as recovered, 2% as improving, with we hope a good prognosis. But there are 12% where we think that there is a permanent disability, permanent sequelae. 25% are not recovered, and for 39%, we assess the outcome as unknown. So we really need to improve the follow-up, and we really need to know about the outcome, also long-term outcome. What is really striking is the difference between the US and the European Economic Area. In the US, 35% of PML reports had a fatal outcome, whereas approximately 9% in the European Union. So sorrow for the typing in the Karnowski. I'm used to this Polish writing, sorry. We also asked the rapporteur, the marketing authorization holder, for the functional status of PML survivors. And here is the cut of the 1st June 2011. It's nearly the same picture. But that, as you have seen from Professor Berger earlier, it's only a later cutoff point. But that brings me to the fact that we need to discuss on the most relevant, clinically relevant score, and that we really need to come back and agree on a common follow-up question and common criteria for long-term follow-up. As you can see here, the company has evaluated or has sent the follow-up questionnaire to 100 to physicians of 109 PML survivors. And you can see here the follow-up time, 6 months and greater, and the response, and they got response for 47 patients. So we really need to enhance the response and have a good picture on the follow-up. And you see there that some patient suffered from mild disability, half of the patient from moderate disability, and also some patients from severe disability. And you see also the figures for the 9 months and more follow-up. So what is the problem with the Karnowski score, in my view, is that only a minority of physicians had reported the pre-PML score, only 7. Because that needs to be evaluated retrospectively. And that makes really an assessment very difficult if you don't have a baseline. So we really need to come back and discuss how to measure long-term follow-up of PML. So I only mentioned this issue. We will discuss this, I think, in depth during this meeting. And that is IRIS, the immune reconstitution inflammatory syndrome. That is a life-threatening complication, and it is it is caused by a reconstitution of the immune system, and this may result in clinical worsening and pathological inflammation. The majority of Tysabri PML patients have developed iris as a complication, and we have updated the SPC in the European Union with regard to this complication. I say the majority of Tysabri patients, according to the information we got for their patients, not all developed iris. It appears that the iris spectrum is consistent with the iris spectrum seen in HIV patient, but maybe because patients are treated with plasma exchange or immunoabsorption, it occurs earlier. And it appears also that it occurs more frequently than in HIV patients, but not to 100%. So far, iris is, in most of the cases, treated with corticosteroids, but to my knowledge, there is no consensus guideline, and that we need to discuss how to most effectively treat also iris. So factors likely to increase PML and the risk for PML. That is, of course, you all know it, the duration of Tysabri therapy, multiple sclerosis patients treated more than 24 months have a significant higher risk, although, as I have demonstrated earlier, that higher risk may start earlier. That may be in particular relevant for the United States. The PML risk, the long-term risk, or the risk beyond 3 to 4 years of treatment is currently unclear because we have less experience in this respect. We know that prior immunosuppressant use may have impact on the risk of PML, but what we need is a stratification, a proper analysis, statistical analysis, and a stratification for severity of disease, for duration of MS. I have seen for the German cases that several patients in Germany with PML, they had MS for decades. And we need to analyze this. And also severity, and that is in particular because it's more likely that patients in the European Union treated with Tysabri have severe disease due to the indication. And we also need to analyze the data with regard to the type of immunosuppressant treatment and with regard to patient age. So the marketing authorization holder has developed an antibody assay, an ELISA assay, and the seroprevalence can be measured with this assay. We have seen that to a low percentage, false positive and negative assay results can be obtained. And I would like to mention that very recently, the CHMP has updated the SPC and has with regard to this information. And it's now clearly stated in the European SPC that the risk for PML can be up to 9 in 1,000 patients treated, and in particular those patients who meet all the 3 risk categories. That means duration of Tysabri treatment more than 24 months, prior immunosuppressant use, and also seropositive for GC antibodies. So possible factors for mortality, and this was already mentioned, that is the time interval between first symptoms and diagnosis of PML. And the only chance of patients is a rapid diagnosis of PML. And related to the time for the diagnosis is that it appears that the larger extent of PML involvement on the brain MRI at the time of diagnosis is also related with mortality and maybe also older age. We need to analyze this. So key elements for risk-benefit analysis. We need to continue to evaluate the PML incidence, and that means long-term and beyond 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 years, and for the different risk groups identified. A prerequisite for this analysis is a consistent case definition of PML, and my colleague Dirk Menzer will discuss this issue and present some thoughts about this. It's important to monitor long-term outcome of PML and iris, and maybe that we need to discuss how the best possible follow-up and the criteria. Is the Karnofsky score better, or should we focus on the EDSS score? That needs to be discussed, and it needs then to be consistently agreed upon by regulators and also by all other stakeholders. And what is, of course, our goal is the identification of patient groups who benefit most from Tysabri. And maybe that in this context, it is important to understand the apparent differences of incidence and the clinical course of PML between the US and the European Economic Area. So, as a summary, risk minimization activities is early diagnosis of PML, and that means high clinical vigilance. And that means continuous education of physicians, of patients, but also on family members. And that is particularly important as the first symptoms can be very, very mild. What is essential is to have a validated and sensitive PCR. And that is in particular a problem for the European Union. So it was proposed a detection threshold as low as possible, below 50 copies per ml. Yes, that's fine, but lower would be better. What we need is an international standard. We need reference laboratories in all countries. And with regard to the MRI protocol, the marketing authorization holder has recommended a standardized protocol, and strict adherence to this protocol is also important. And maybe that, while it's now recommended once yearly in the European Union to perform an MRI, but maybe for patients, in particular those who are seropositive, more frequent MRI are maybe also of benefit. So we need to get experience with regard to the antibody test and the impact for risk minimization. What I think is essential is that sensitivity and specificity of the test needs to be determined. And we need to reevaluate the different treatment option for PML and for iris treatment. And thank you very much.